Are you guys ready to navigate some rough seas with me? We're about to hit the waters, and I am your captain. What's going on, guys? Carter here with Edge Mindset. We're going to be talking about a little bit of a tricky topic. Little bit of a tricky topic here. I'm going to be trying to navigate this as best I can. Give me some grace. I've got to be cautious about what I say, and I've got to do some upfront things about this. So the topic of the video is I want to give you some tips about when to be cautious about knives that are claiming to be made, automatic knives that are claiming to be made in the United States, when to trust what they're saying, and when to maybe think about it a little bit harder. There's some telltale things. Now, first off, if you don't care, then cool. You don't care. None of this matters. None of this matters. If you do care, then maybe this will kind of help you, right? It's easy to get kind of enchanted by new offerings and say, that's so cool, and you jump on it and you believe what they say, and then later on you're like, oh, wait, maybe that's not the truth. The other thing is when you're navigating price point, is it worth the money? Should it be less expensive? Depending on where it's made, could affect that, and if they're not being truthful, you might be getting swindled a little bit. But before we start, a couple things I want to make absolutely clear. I am not a legalese person. I'm not here to give legal advice. Any legal related information I say here is purely based anecdotally on what I've read or heard. I am not learned in the legalities of importation of automatic knives or anything like that. So take that with caution, right? This is just my understanding and my opinion of things I've heard, things I've learned, being a part of this industry as long as I have, seeing companies come and go, and what I've picked up. The other thing is, all of these knives are made in the United States as stated by their respective manufacturers, right? I'm using these as an example, as a backdrop, because I need something to show, because I don't have any knives I don't have any automatic knives. I gotta keep saying automatic. I keep saying knives. So if I ever just say knife, no, I'm talking only about automatic knives in this video. I don't own any automatic knives that are manufactured outside of the United States because that would be illegal. Because it's illegal to import automatic knives or switchblades or whatever you want to call them, whether they're side opening or out the front. It's illegal to import these into the United States. It's also illegal to import parts into the United States, which is an important addition to that law. And so none of these clearly could be fitting that description because it would be illegal for them to come in. So all of these are made in the United States. We'll run through what they are real quick, just so you know. This is a Chavez Chub OTF. It is actually made in my home state here in the United States, as stated by the manufacturer. This is a Cleric 2 OTF. This is made by Heretic Knives, who is owned by Tony Marfione, who is the founder and owner of Microtech Knives. Kind of fun fact there. Wholly made in the United States, as stated by the manufacturer. This is Microtech Combat Troodon Outbreak Edition, wholly made in the United States as stated by the manufacturer. This is an ADV Tactical Stinger made by Backup Tactical in the United States as stated by the manufacturer. So let's see, what do we want to tackle first? Here's some things to look out for, right? If you see a knife pop up onto the market, a lot of this is common sense, but sometimes you just need a little incentive to really think about things. So some stuff you want to look out for. If you see a knife pop up and you're wondering, okay, they're saying it's made in the United States. Is it really made in the United States? For example, like if this one here, now obviously this is made in the United States, as stated by the manufacturer. I'm just using this as a random example because I don't have an actual example of a knife, automatic knife not made in the United States. If you had a knife and it kind of pops up out of nowhere with no evidence of it being designed or manufactured, that's a little bit of a potential flag, right? Doesn't mean companies are not being truthful. It just means, you might want to be a little bit cautious, right? Most companies have a very clear track record of manufacturing. For example, Microtech, they've been making knives for decades. There's videos of their operations, of their facilities, of them making knives, sharpening knives, all of those things. Same with Heretic Knives. There's evidence of them making knives. They post videos and content around making knives. This one as well. I've seen these being assembled. Not quite as strong evidence on this exact knife. But all three of these are knife companies, right? They have a history of making knives. Now, another thing to look out for is, has that company outsourced anything before? For example, Microtech has. They do have connections overseas in knife manufacturing. Same with Chavez knives. I don't think these two do. But that's something, also a small thing. Do they have those connections? Have they dealt with overseas manufacturing before? Are they plugged into that world? Meaning, would it be possible for them to reach out to said companies? Oh, actually, ADV has done overseas knife making. They did the Scavenger, I believe, by Reich, if I'm not mistaken. ADV Tactical has done some overseas manufacturing. So that means, there is a connection there. Once again, no red flags, just, light orange flags, things like that. Do they have the ability to make knives? It's one thing to manufacture different widgets. It's another thing to make a knife. A lot of knife stuff is very specialized. These serrations, right? Like, you need a machine, a specialized machine, to make manufactured serrations like this. These are not done by hand. This isn't a little elf in a workshop that's just like making these little serrations. Now, I don't know everything involved in doing serrations like this, but this is not something that just any old machining company would be able to do. Even just planing blades flat. If you're a company that's just manufacturing little widgets, maybe aluminum something or others, doesn't mean you can make a blade. Heat treatment. Heat treatment is a specialized operation. Not overly complicated, but it's an investment to be able to heat treat knives, to grind knives, to do all these things. And I'm not saying widget making companies can't move into that world, but they do have to invest in it. So that's another thing to look out for. Are they really pivoting into a knife company? Because making knives is an investment. You really have to commit to it. Or do these knives just seem to come out of nowhere and they just have 4 different varieties show up and all of a sudden they're for sale? And you're wondering, how did this come about? I have been a part of this knife world for a long time. I've seen companies offer new things, and they do it the same way. They start with a safe, but not this, obviously, but once again, just an example. None of these have anything to do with what I'm saying here. They're just backdrop examples. Knife companies start with a safe design, and they usually offer safe finishes. Stonewash blade. They do a run of those. They see how they go. If they sell well, they come out with a different variety. Maybe they will have different blade shapes. Maybe they will have different coatings on the blades. Maybe they'll have different colored anodizations. What you don't typically see is the first offering consisting of a bunch of different varieties with different finishes and blade shapes, because all of those manufacturing differences cost money and investment to do. And so investing in everything needed to do all of that, that's a pretty big pivot for a company to do. That's a lot of money to spend. And it's a little bit strange to offer a bunch of that right out of the get-go. Because when you really start thinking about the details of the knives, being able to anodize different colors, being able to Cerakote or DLC blades, serrations, doing different blade shapes, bead blasting. These are all things that require investment to do. Now, it is possible that the widgets that they may or may not have been making beforehand required them to have some of this capability. Bead blasting, things like that. A lot of machine companies already can do a lot of that stuff. Anodizing, of course, once you can electronically anodize, which is a pretty low-fi process, you can do any color. You just do different amperage, you leave it in longer, you can do any color. So by no means does this cover everything, right? If you're a machine shop that can do CNC machining, basic milling, you can invest in a few extra machines to do some blades. But, it's an investment. So that's a big pivot. So keeping an eye out for those kind of things, just kind of using your brain, looking back through their history. Have they teased the knife? Have they shown the design? Have you seen them go through the process? Or did it just show up all of a sudden out of nowhere? Hey, we made this thing, come buy it. Just things to be cautious about. And once again, if you don't care, you don't care. None of this applies. If you're like, if the knife is good and I think it looks cool, I don't care where it comes from. I don't care where it's made. It looks cool. And legally speaking, maybe it is made in the United States. You got to remember, that's a soft definition. A lot of the times, if you just assemble it, or if most of the components are sourced in the United States, you can qualify as made in the US. Doesn't mean it's legal when you're talking about automatic knives. It still could be illegal because you're importing some parts into the United States used to make an automatic knife, but the made in US may technically be true, right? It's not as simple as, when you say something's made in the US, it doesn't mean every single component of the thing has to be sourced and manufactured here at all. Now, I think they have tightened that up a little bit. Back in the day, you could get away with a lot more, like literally importing all the parts and putting it together, and you could say made in the US. I think they've kind of gotten a little tougher on that. But still, it's a soft definition, and you can get away with quite a bit by saying it's made in the US, and maybe it's not really what an average person would consider as made in the US. Something to think about. In case you're ever cautious, if you see something pop up and you're like, are they being truthful? And you may ask yourself, why would they lie? Well, if it's not obvious, it's because it's illegal, right? So it's in their best interest to say it is made in the US. We did not import these parts. It's all manufactured here because it's illegal to do so. You don't want to publicly announce that. All right, guys, that's it. I don't want to keep talking anymore. I don't want to get myself in trouble. I think I've kept it pretty generic. And just to reiterate, nothing that I said has anything to do with any of these knives. These are just backdrop knives for examples, because I don't have what I'm talking about. I don't have an example of that because that would be illegal to have, or illegal for the company to have brought in or sold or whatever. You know what I mean? So none of that applies to these. These are all made in the United States as stated by the manufacturer. 100%, nothing. I have no evidence on any knives I have, no evidence on any automatic knives I have that they are not exactly what the manufacturer says they are. I was just thinking, my little rat brain starts thinking about different things, and I wanted to bring up some stuff I've noticed, things to look out for. So comment down below if you've noticed any companies. Don't name them by name, but if you've ever noticed a company do some of these things where it seems a little suspicious. Curious to see if you've noticed that, and also comment if you care at all about that, if that's anything you're concerned about or worry about or wonder about. All right, guys, I'm out. Talk to you later.